Okay, so in the previous video we have initialized our environment variables, and in this video I will show you how to construct a proper folder structure to our backend API, and let's see how to use a simple API as our initial uh, testings. Okay, so the project structure that we are going to use is basically pretty much similar to the standard MVC structure, where you have a model, view, and controller. But here we are going to only focus on backend development. Therefore, we won't be having any view component inside our project structure. But if you are going to perform any server-side rendering, then you may have that folder as well. Okay, so first folder that I'm going to require is controllers. So all your business logic will be rely on this folder, and second folder is models. So a model is basically sort of schema types that you are going to use to store your data on the database. So when it comes to our database chapter, I will explain how to construct models and stuff. But for now, simply just create this folder. Then when we are specifying several different business logics, we may need several utility classes. So therefore, I will specify folder called utils. So all the utility classes and functions will be defined over here. And this stuff are the main files that we require. And for testing purposes, let's create several controllers and uh, other stuffs as well. Okay, so I forgot to mention that important component, which is routes. So routes we need to specify inside this folder, and basically what routes are going to do is it distinguish several resources, right? So let's say we have a specific route for user handling, right? Then we have another route for the post handling, or we have another route for the authentication handling, things like that. So all the necessary routes we can define over here. Okay, so I think we are good to go. And yeah, for testing purposes, let's simply create a controller. So let's say test control.js. Yeah, so inside this test controller, we can write functions. So I will use this arrow functions method. So let's say test function, and when you are going to use Express, all the functions have these two components as attributes, which is request and response, right? So requests are basically the requests initialized by the client, and responses are the return results back to the client, right? Yeah, so that is a test function, and inside this test function I will simply specify a log for now. So let's say it's working, right? Okay, so once I specify this function, I need to export it as well. Then other JavaScript files can access that function. So module.export equals to test function. So just use, we can simply use it as like this. Then it will only export this function. But if I specify it as like this, then later on, if we are going to declare several more functions, we can put it those functions inside this bracket. So therefore, I use the export modules like this. Okay, so now this function has been exported, So any functions will be routed through a specific route file. So in this case, I will create a test route file, name it as let's say test routes.js. So inside this test route, I need to initialize Express again. So require Express, and I need to construct a router by using Express. So express.route. Then once that router is constructed, we can call a specific function with respect to specific API route. So first I need to import the functions that I require. So I think it's a test function, and it's in the controllers and test control. Right. Then I can create many routes as I wanted by using this router. So simply say router.route. So let's say test and dot get. So this is a get method. So there are several methods like this, such as get, post, put, delete. So those are basically HTTP methods we need to invoke to perform certain functions. So in my case, I just need to test this API whether it is working or not. So I will simply use get method. So and inside this get method, it must call this function. Right? Okay. So I need to export this module as well. So let's say module.exports equals route. Okay, now that a function has been exported, so we can call that function inside our app. So inside app, first we need to import our routes. So I will comment it as routes. So const this router require routes test routes. So we need to specify this app to use that route. So app.use. So we can specify further API routes over here, and it must call this router, right? So let's say we need to specify it as API v1 and or okay, let's say test, right? So the entire REST API to command these function will be API. So let's say complete route to call test function. So it will be API v1 test, and inside this test router we have again this test, right? So for now let's say test function, or let's say test fn. So it will be like this, right? So this is the entire route that we need to call that test function, and it will append several more routes such as localhost and the port number in order to call this specific resource. So you may wonder why we use this v1 and this test and this API. So basically test denotes what sort of a route we are going to use. So in my case we are going to use test routes, so I will name it as test. So likewise there can be user, there can be auth, post, comment, likes, things like that. and v1 is basically the version of that specific route. For example, let's say later on, if you are going to expose a different version of this route, all you have to do is simply duplicate this line and change this version number, right? So that's why I have specified v1 over here. And APIs basically stand for basically this is API, right? This is a REST API to call backend functionalities. Therefore, I have specified it as API. And so this is the standard method we are going to name your REST API URLs in order to perform API calls. Okay, so let's see how to perform this API call. So you have to open up your Postman and let's create a new collection, and I will rename this as Express RESTful API. And inside this collection we need a GET request. I'll name it as testing, and our route will be HTTP localhost, so it will be 3000 API v1 and test and test fn. So now if I press send, it will simply log this line, so it's working, which means our function is called correctly. But as you can see in the Postman, it is waiting for a response, but we haven't returned any response over there, so that's why it is waiting like that. So let's make a response as well. So in order to make a response, all you have to do is basically go to your controller function and you have to use this res. So let's say res, and you need to specify your status code as well. So I will use 200. So status code is basically standard HTTP codes that you are going to send back to the client. So then the web browser knows whether the server was working correctly or there is any errors or things like that. So this is just for the ease of client side renderings, but yeah, it is best practice to use status code within your responses as well. And this response will be sent as a JSON object. So JSON is basically stand for JavaScript object notations. So this is basically a data type, and basically it will be like this. So if you look at this package.json file, this is a JSON object, right? So likewise, you can return any sort of object by using this JSON wrapper. So in my case, I will specify two fields inside this JSON object. So first thing is status, which means whether it is success or fail. So in my case, I will name it as success. And second field is basically data. So inside this data, there can be another JSON object, or there can be an array, or there can be a simple string, and things like that. So in my case, I will simply return it's working, and I don't need this log anymore, so I will remove that. And now if I invoke this URL again, so now it gives me a response, but it don't give me any log over here, right? But if you look at your Postman console, you can see we have received this body, right? So the status is success and data is it's working. Alright, so that's how we perform a REST API call, and we have set up a nice looking folder structure as well. And yeah, I think for now those stuff will be enough, and in the next video I will show you more interesting stuff.